Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, and entertainment and give you my thoughts. If you joined us live, super happy to have you. If you have any questions or comments during the show about any of the topics I'm going to cover, feel free to drop, a comment, drop it in the live chat. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on it. I have it up on my phone over here. Hopefully we can get a conversation started. If you haven't already, please like this live stream. It really does help with other people finding the channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. If you're watching this after the fact, super happy to have you as well. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes in the description. We stream this live stream every Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, rain or shine. I will say this week I've come down with a cold of some kind. It started on Friday night with a little tickle and then became a fever on Saturday and Sunday, and it's just congestion. So what I'm actually going to be doing today is I was like, well, I still want to do the show for all of my dedicated I can't even say it with a straight face, for all my dedicated viewers. But I just wasn't feeling super up to it. Luckily, I was feeling better today, so I started working on getting the stories prepared. And then I realized, you know what? Story number one is just so big that I feel like maybe I can just break it up into 5 stories, give myself a little bit of a break so I don't work myself into a ditch. So this is going to be kind of a different kind of episode this week where there's still going to be 5 topics, but they're all going to be related to the same macro topic. Which if you're looking at the title description for this live stream, you already know what that's going to be. But in any case, if you haven't already, like I said, please like this live stream. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. But before we could do anything Disney D23 related, we got to cover the box office. Let me just grab a quick drink here. Also, if I'm a little more mellow than maybe I usually am, you know why, because I'm not feeling well. Okay. Let's take a look at the box office from this past weekend. Total box office was about $158 million domestically, which only constituted about a 7% drop from the previous weekend, so that's still pretty good. August is oftentimes a weird month where it's not that the box office itself is bad, because usually you're carrying over a bunch of really successful July movies, but then stuff opening usually has trouble opening. August, it's September. Like, it's changed somewhat now, but I remember as I came of age, like in the mid-2010s, in terms of like my awareness of film, of like the film industry as a business, the conventional wisdom was always August and sometimes September and then January are where you just dump the films that you don't care about, right? If you're a studio, the films that you don't think are going to do well or you don't think aren't very good or both, right? So to see that the box office hasn't gone down substantially since the previous weekend makes sense, right? But what is a surprise is a new film opening this week. It didn't crack number 1. It's at number 2 here. The adaptation of the very popular novel, from my understanding, It Ends With Us, a story of love and domestic abuse, and I've heard it's maybe a little controversial, but in any case, it must have a good enough of a following. So if you watched my show last week, you remember me remarking that I was projecting it to make about 35 to 41 million for the weekend. And I remember being surprised because I was like, I never heard of this movie, or I've never heard of the source material. Big budget movies have been struggling this year, even if we've more or less turned a corner in terms of the box office. So I was like, how is this movie going to make 41 million its opening weekend? It did even better. It opened about 50 million, so it definitely even surpassed those, in my opinion, what seemed at the time lofty projections. Bringing in 50 million. Again, not cracking number 1. This Blake Lively starred romantic drama is playing second fiddle to her husband's film, right? Because, of course, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds are married. But this did have the best per theater average for the weekend, almost 14 grand per theater. This brings its domestic total to just that 50, but its worldwide total to 80, right? So this is an $80 million movie on its first weekend off of just a $25 million budget, right? So that's well past that, both of those thresholds to break even, being up more than a 200% profit, percent return, right? So it's very, and it's interesting. It must have such a really strong fan base because, from my understanding, the reviews have not been great. I think on Letterboxd it has like a 3.0, like exactly out of 5, right? And usually when something is there, it usually means it's about to teeter into the 2.9, 2.8 realm. But again, there must have been enough of a hunger from those fans to see the story brought to life again with some pretty good talent. Again, Blake Lively is a competent actress that we haven't really seen a lot of lately. She's been busy, right? Unfortunately, we still live in a patriarchal society. She's been home, taking care of the kids while Ryan's been out making 800 Deadpool movies. Maybe now she's kind of finally tipping her toe back into the world of acting. Also opening this week, Epic Fail. That's not the name of the movie, but it may as well be. The Borderlands movie, opening at number 4. This, of course, is the adaptation of the very popular, if perhaps oversaturated, video game franchise, which I have yet to play, full disclosure. But the announcement of this, it felt like a movie that was 10 years too late. And then we got cast information, and it seemed really mismatched. And then we got trailers, and it looked awful. And I've not seen it, and I do not plan to see it, because apparently it is so bad that for a brief period it had a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. So, for context, Rotten Tomatoes is not, if something has a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, that does not mean the average score that reviewers have given it is a 92 out of 100. What the 92% refers to, it's really more of a statistical answer to the question of did these reviewers have a net positive or net negative experience, right? So if every reviewer gives it a 6 out of 10, saying it's a net positive but just okay, that movie will get 100% Rotten Tomatoes, right? So typically if a movie, has a really good Rotten Tomatoes score, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be as good as it seems, but you also have to take it with a grain of salt and actually read the reviews or see the scores or what have you. So the fact that this not only had a bad Rotten Tomatoes score, but had a 0 until one reviewer turned in a net positive review. I think now it's at a 4%, right? Every worst fear was realized, right? From what people have been saying. And it couldn't even deliver on a financial sense, right? So I had projected it would make about 9 to 14 million, and it could barely, just fell right below that, around 8.8 million. And that was also its worldwide gross, which I'm surprised. And maybe there was an error on Box Office Mojo, where I sourced this info. But I'm surprised. This feels like a movie that, not that it would play well, but that it would benefit from having a worldwide release, an international release. I'm sure that's planned. But again, just looking here, so it's made about 8.8 million. Now, if your movie only cost $1 million, that's great. This movie cost about $115 million. So right now it has a percent return of negative 92%. So this was one of those things where it's still a surprise, because I think we all thought this was going to be bad, but I don't think anyone thought it was going to be this bad. So it's definitely disappointing if you're part of the Borderlands creative team. Also opening this week, we have the indie film Cuckoo, starring Hunter Schafer from Euphoria, debuting at number 9. Just barely squeaking into the top 10, but again, it is a indie film. It's still open wide, though. It opened in over 1,500 theaters, and I think the conventional definition of going wide would be 600 theaters minimum, but we really should come up with new, different gradations of it, because it feels limited. If you have 599 theaters, that's limited release, and then if you have 620, that's wide. But that's also in the same conversation as something Deadpool has over 4,300 theaters. But in any case, it did fall a little bit below my projections. And also when I say my projections, I'm sourcing from a bunch of places. Don't get it twisted. But the projections I had been kind of gravitating towards was about 4 to 8 million. It just kind of fell just short of that, around a little bit more than 3 million for the weekend. But this was also its only, again, it similar to Borderlands. It's, as far as I know, did not have any international play. So this 3-ish million constitutes its total worldwide so far, off of a budget of $7 million, right? So again, similarly, not as expensive as Borderlands, but still so far a flop, right? I consider movies that, a flop is a movie that I would say opens. I don't even know if I want to see like these yellow. If it opens and it's yellow, right? I would say that's a flop. And if it's red and it's opening, I would say that's a bomb, right? And that's not even necessarily true all the time, but depending on the cost of the movie, Cuckoo is definitely geared towards more indie audience. It's not really super concerned with making back a bunch of money. But I'm sure if I was the person who made Cuckoo, I would hope that it would at least make back the $7 million, let alone making any profit to take home, to the wife and kids, if you will. Continuing this week, in its second weekend, we have Trap, the M. Night Shyamalan movie, dropping from 3rd to 6th in its second weekend, so dropping out of the top 5 in only its second weekend. Brought in about $6.7 million, which constitutes a 56-ish% drop, so again, not good. It's definitely could be worse, and considering that it's actually doing semi-well overseas is helping it, right? So its total domestic take is a little bit under 29 million, but its worldwide total is about 45 million. Again, so off of a $30 million budget. So whereas if I'm going to you can't see this, but I'm going to look at my notes from last week. So last week, its worldwide total was about 20, and it basically more than doubled its worldwide total. There's something about M. Night Shyamalan films. They just have a way of, just kind of like they're. It's like the music version of it's like the film version of an earworm. It just kind of burrows itself in there, and is able to kind of have some longevity, despite some not great reviews. And I was actually kind of excited for Trap, but I'm very busy, and I heard it wasn't very good. And I just don't have the time to go see movies that are most likely not very good, right? There's enough movies I go to see that are supposedly really good, and I don't like them all that much. I don't need to go see movies that I'm assuredly not going to like. But Trap, it's definitely had that drop, but I don't think it lost any theaters. And it'll be interesting to see if this is something that can kind of hold out in the weeks ahead. Again, it has kind of like a little niche here of kind of like I don't even say it's a horror film, more like a thriller. And I don't really think anything here except maybe Twisters could kind of fill that niche. But again, that's also a very different kind of thriller. More of a disaster thriller, whereas this Trap is very situational. Also continuing to its second week, Harold and the Purple Crayon, dropping from 6th to 8th in its second frame. I'd be shocked if this is still in the top 10 next week. Or at the very least, maybe just at the top, maybe just at 10. If that. But not as bad of a drop as Trap. Had a 48% drop. But this did have the lowest per theater average of the top 10 at only $932. So think about that. Like, we think about movies because they end up making millions and millions, sometimes billions with a B dollars. We forget that it's theater by theater, right? These are a bunch of theaters, but it's just single establishments that all contribute to that mark, right? And Harold and the Purple Crayon is in over 3,300 theaters. So on average, this movie was making less than $1,000. I feel like it cost that theater $1,000 just to pay the staff for that shift. This brings its domestic total just under 13, worldwide only to about a little, maybe 15.5. Again, off of a $40 million budget. So this is definitely, again, kind of like Borderlands. It feels like it's 30 years too late. And I'm just surprised that this movie even got made at all. A couple other notable movies here. We have still Deadpool and Wolverine still holding its first place spot in its third weekend, bringing in just a little more than 54 million, which was a 44% drop. So it's kind of following Inside Out's, lead, where it kind of keeps having these 50-ish% drops. week to week. I think this is definitely one of those movies that everyone goes to see, and it's obviously still making a bunch of cheddar, but I think everyone who's really wanted to see it has seen it. It's not just a matter of how many times can you get the people that have already seen it to go back over and over. No movie makes over $1 billion with people only going once. You only make that kind of money if you have people going back and back and back. It did actually add 100 theaters, which is interesting. But again, its per theater average still fell below It Ends With Us, right? So, I mean, obviously, again, that makes sense, that movie's opening. But still, this is what I always speak to, is that you should work with smaller budgets and smaller movies to kind of spread out the risk of your movie, right? Because let's look at these totals here. So the domestic total was about $494 million, and its worldwide total is up to over $1 billion. So it's the second movie this year to pass the $1 billion mark. The first, of course, being Inside Out 2. So both movies are Disney movies, in a sense, off of just a $200 million budget. So that so far, and again, so far because this still is going to play really well for weeks. That's like a over 400% return, right? But then you have something like Long Legs, which is at number 10, right? So it dropped from 7th to 10th in its 5th frame. So it's been in theaters for over a month. Not a great turn, only about 2 million for the weekend, more than a 50% drop, lost about 800 theaters. But this is where it's important. So its domestic total is at around 71 million. Worldwide total about 90 million. Off just about a $10 million budget. That's an 800% return. Now, Deadpool and Wolverine could very well end up being like a 800% return. But if it wasn't, then that's $200 million that you put into that, and you didn't make back that kind of return. My philosophy has always been, and I sound like a broken record here, you should spread out that risk. I think it makes financial sense, again, from like a risk-adjusted basis. But then also, just as the creative side of me, it would allow for more movies and more creative movies. Because if they have smaller budgets, none of them has to be the one that, they're called tent poles for a reason, because there's just a couple of them and they hold up the whole thing. They hold up the whole studio. Whereas if you took the $200 million budget for Deadpool and you spread it out to, $10, $20 million movies, or even just $40 million movies, you could have more interesting cinema for audiences. And if one of them does really well, that's great. But if one of them isn't very good, it's not going to tank the whole studio, right? So it just baffles me that studios just don't want to do this, just because they look at the gross return and not the percent return, right? Because this is on par. I mean, this is better than even Inside Out 2, right? Which is, now in its 9th weekend. So it's over 2 months now, dropped from 5th to 7th in its 9th weekend. Brought in just a humble 6.7 million, a 57% drop. But total, not 50, I was looking at Trap. It only, actually this is much better. Inside Out 2 made just under 5 million, which is not as good as what I had said. I was looking at Trap. But a 27% drop, lost about 400 theaters, but has made 636 million domestically, 1.6-ish billion with a B worldwide off of a $200 million budget. So that's like a 700% return, right? Same thing with Despicable Me 4. You have, it's at a 5th, dropping from 4th to 5th in its 6th weekend, brought in about 8 million, about 30% drop, lost almost 400 theaters, but has made, 330 million domestically, 800 million, almost $1 billion worldwide off of just a $100 million budget, right? So that's it's made about half of what Inside Out has made, Inside Out 2, but it also was made for half, right? So those are huge success stories of the industry for the summer box office season. But look at Long Legs. I just can't help but look at Long Legs and go, this should be the model. That if you can just make it good, in full disclosure, I haven't seen Long Legs. It could be a big pile of horseshit. I don't know. But if you could just make more movies that just kind of catch on, you can make a lot of money off of not very much money. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see as we move further into the month of August, as this, quote unquote blockbuster season kind of dies down. Kind of, started off really, really slow. It had a bunch of false starts and then kind of made up for it with a bunch of huge movies. But we still have a little bit of ways to go before we enter, quote unquote, Oscar season. Okay, just want to give a quick plug before we move on. Cinema and QSO is not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I write more formal written reviews of new movies coming out. I have my review up for Deadpool and Wolverine. You can find that in the link in the description, or you can just go to your browser and type in cinemaandqso.substack.com. It really would be a huge help to go support that. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, so like I promised, tonight, because I'm not feeling well, if you're just joining, I am sick as a dog, but I couldn't disappoint the fans, so I decided to take what was going to be just story number 1 and break it up into the 5 stories to see, to kind of get into a little bit more detail than I maybe would have if it was just one story. And also that helped it saved me some time not having to do the research for 5 different stories. I just did it all today. So let's talk about section number 1. So D23, of course, was this weekend, Disney's fan event, where they, showcase, I think it's like every other year, they showcase new and exciting things happening with the company. And it's always been very useful for Disney to help change the narrative, right? And what do I mean by that? Well, if Disney's not going through a great period, if it can deliver on some exciting announcements at D23, sometimes that can mitigate or distract from those problems entirely. Now, will do all of these things that they announce always come to fruition or come to fruition in the way they were pitched? No. But it helps set the narrative and, again, gets people like me covering it and talking about it, right? So I want to break down each of the kind of different areas of what they announced. So I want to start with their theme parks, because I feel like the announcements here were some of the most exciting, but also some of the most controversial. So Disney announced a slew of theme park additions and subtractions would be the wrong word, but substitutions, right, for currently existing things. So I want to kind of go park by park, kind of look at the announcements, kind of give you my thoughts here. So looking at Disneyland in California, starting off with what is both kind of cool but also kind of creepy at the same time. One of the announcements that they made is that in Disneyland, so in Florida, they have the Hall of Presidents, and it's the whole thing about the presidents. In Disneyland in California, they just have Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. So it's just the Abraham Lincoln portion. Well, they've announced that they're going to be doing a rotating show with Mr. Lincoln, right? So sometimes there'll be Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and then other times it's going to be this animatronic Walt Disney show featuring, you guessed it, an animatronic Walt Disney. I don't even know, talking about what? Talking about his work, his philosophy, which I find just so interesting, and that's why I wanted to start with that. Because on one hand, I've always been a big admirer of Walt Disney, but it also, this move speaks to a weird corporate necromancy, right? Where it's Disney really, we've been talking about this with their intellectual property for years, of trying to basically grave dig their own legacy and history. And now it's gone to the most logical extreme of we're literally going to resurrect, in a sense, our founder in perpetuity to exist always as we want him to. I'm sure it's going to be really impressive. And of course, I like Walt Disney. I like Disney history. So I'm a fan of this on paper, but it's just a really interesting message that they're sending that I don't think they're trying to send, right? And it also, of course, Disney was a really incredible innovator and entertainer, but was also had his own share of problems, right? Both creatively and just in his personal life, right? So, if you're someone that hates Walt Disney for whatever reason, of course you're going to hate this. If you love Walt Disney unconditionally, you're going to love this. Me, I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And it's just interesting that Walt Disney has become such a figure that you are rotating him with Abraham Lincoln, like the guy that perhaps saved the United States in a way. Walt Disney is on that level. At least that's the signal that they are implicitly sending, even if that's not what they're trying to say. And then, of course, also Disneyland will be receiving this November Tiano's Bayou Adventure, which, of course, is the reskin of Splash Mountain. That's been getting really good reviews for the Florida iteration that opened, I think it was like a month or two ago. If only it worked. I have been reading people complaining it's always down, it's always broken. And even when it's running, certain animatronics won't be working, right? Which makes sense because from what I've seen the videos of, it's a very impressive animatronic palooza. But, Disneyland will be able to expect that coming in November. Across the street, so of course there's Disneyland, but as part of Disneyland Resort, there's also the other theme park, Disney California Adventure. And that's kind of where Disney will drop all of the stuff that it wants to bring to California but doesn't know where to put it. So Disneyland California Adventure, or DCA, if you will, is going to be receiving an Avatar ride, right, based off of James Cameron, from the twisted mind of James Cameron. It's going to be a new ride. Notably, it's not going to just be a clone of one of the two rides in Animal Kingdom in Florida. So that's going to be exciting. There's also going to be a Coco ride based off, of course, of the Pixar film Coco. And I think most notably is there's going to be a Marvel Avengers ride called Avengers Infinity Defense. It's going to be like this multiversal adventure with our heroes trying to stop King Thanos. Like it's like a multiversal version of him where Thanos actually won, I guess. Which doesn't really make sense because he did win. And then we beat him at a later date. But in any case. And there's also be Stark Flight Lab, which is... I don't know how to describe it. It's like this roller coaster that is almost like an arm. Like remember those robotic arms from Iron Man? Well, it's gonna be this thing, but like you're gonna be in the arm. It's gonna be like these seats, and it's gonna kind of spin you around and stuff like that, right? So that's all the updates at Disneyland, and I'm gonna kind of try to move through these semi quickly, and I'm gonna do that to make a point. I'm not trying to rush through these necessarily. Going across the country to Florida, Walt Disney World. The 3 of the 4 parks are getting some major additions. Epcot is only getting like a new lounge or something. Epcot is not getting anything new. So if you're a big Epcot fan, you might be upset, but then also Epcot is being untouched, right? And that's a big issue that some people are having with these additions. So in Magic Kingdom, they are getting rid of the riverfront kind of body of water that was along Frontierland and Liberty Square. And they're basically turning it into a Cars-themed area in Frontierland. Because I guess since Cars takes place in, not New Mexico or wherever it is, and it has, it's like the Grand Canyon, that kind of topography or geography, Disney Imagineers, or really I should say Disney corporate probably went, you know what? We have similar environmental pieces in Frontierland, so maybe we can make a Cars related thing, even though Frontierland is all about the Wild West and the frontier. But that won't stop Disney for trying to make Cars work. So people are not happy for 2 reasons. One, because it feels such like a perversion of the theming, which I don't know why people are upset. Not because they shouldn't be upset, but Disney has basically given up on the idea of theming years ago. So I'm not sure why people are like, oh, I can't believe they're going to do that. I can believe it. It makes complete sense from their point of view. But this is gonna, so that's one reason why they're upset. But then number 2, it's not just adding something a bit gauche, if you will, to something that they care about. It's also getting rid of something, right? So again, they're getting rid of that body of water, and a lot of people feel, it speaks to something Walt Disney really wanted. I think that's something from Disneyland originally, like this like kind of Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer riverboat experience. Like you can go on that boat that goes around the lake, right? So people feel like it's kind of a perversion, again, of Disney's, of like the spirit of something Walt Disney really would have wanted. And also just it also, I don't have any sources, unfortunately, but I've been scrolling. I've been very interested to see what people on Twitter have been saying, and a lot of people have said, a theme park, the way Disney does it, should be more than the sum of its parts. And to Disney corporate, they see that area of land that is more or less being unused, quote unquote, as wasted opportunity. But what they don't understand is that something like that sets a mood. It sets a tone, right? It's not, you don't need every square. How can we maximize every dollar for every square inch? Sometimes things are there to help set a mood, and they're not meant to have an attraction on it, right? And that was a really interesting point that people brought up. But the big announcement for Magic Kingdom is that they're going to be incorporating a Villains Land. So if you follow my channel, I did a whole video about what a fifth Walt Disney World park, its own park, could be. And I had said this as one of them, and it wasn't unique to me. People have been talking about the idea of a Villains Land for years, decades even. It is finally happening. Again, it's almost kind of like too little, too late. Like it's like you finally got around to doing it, but I feel people have kind of moved on from wanting that. But it's not going to be its own park. It's going to be a land within Magic Kingdom. I'm not quite sure where it's going to be. I don't know if we have that info yet. We might, and I'm just ignorant about that, so forgive me. But it will be interesting to see them finally. That's a big swing. I got to give them credit. That's a big swing, a whole new land in Magic Kingdom. They've expanded lands in Magic Kingdom, but the last true new land was Toontown, and then they got rid of it, and they made it part of New Fantasyland, which is just Fantasyland Plus, just more. So this is our first true new land in Magic Kingdom in forever. So that is kind of exciting. Going down the street now to Animal Kingdom, they are going to be replacing Dinoland USA, rest in peace, with a Tropical Americas section. They're not replacing Dinoland USA wholesale right away. They're going to kind of do it in phases. So the very popular dinosaur ride is still going to be intact for the time being. Though eventually the area will include an Indiana Jones ride, which notably is distinct from the Disneyland Indiana Jones ride. It's going to be a brand new adventure. That's always what the marketing likes to say. It's also going to feature a themed area called Pueblo Esperanza, which is like an Encanto themed area. And it will feature a Casita Madrigal attraction, right? So I believe that might be some kind of ride based off of, the magical house in Encanto. And what might be the most important change to of Walt Disney Park, a decades-long attraction is getting replaced. And you would think there would be uproar. But I don't see any uproar. In fact, I see celebration. And that's because it's tough to be a bug. The awful 4D experience that has been inside the Tree of Life at Animal Kingdom, I think since the park opened, is being replaced with a Zootopia equivalent called Zootopia Better Zoogether. With a pun, right? Of course, it's tough to be a bug. It's awful. It's horrifying for children. Not that it's super scary, but just very sensory and loud and scary. Weird smells. Awful 3D technology. And it's the one where they stab you. There's parts where there's like little sharp bugs and they kind of poke you in the back. But I have back problems. I have a very sensitive back, so it literally felt like someone punched me in the lower back. So I don't think anyone is going to be upset with that change, right? But what was causing some concern, right? So a change that they're going to make in Hollywood Studios, formerly MGM Studios, which is what it is in my heart. They're going to be adding a whole new land. You have Toy Story Land. You've seen Toy Story Land. You've seen Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Now it's time for Monstropolis, a Monsters, Inc. themed land, if you will, based, of course, on the Monsters, Inc. franchise, which I actually find kind of cool. I love the Monsters, Inc. movies, plural, and I love that world. But this is going to be an entire land, which I feel kind of strange about, and I don't really like how Hollywood Studios has kind of become this place where it's just like they're not even trying to couch stuff in Imagineering and brand new adventure. It's really like we have a whole section just for Toy Story. So if your kids love Toy Story, go over there. And if you guys like Star Wars, there's a whole Star Wars land. As opposed to having something that's a little more integrated. But, you know, Bob Iger isn't watching these videos, so this isn't going to change. So Monstropolis, it's going to feature a suspended roller coaster based on the door chase scene, which you should be able to see here in the photos. Which is really great. Again, it's one of those things that it's like you watch that movie in 2001 and go, oh, this is so perfect. It's almost like they designed it to be a Disney World roller coaster. So I'm surprised it's taken them this long. I think I read it's going to be the first suspended roller coaster at a Disney park. At least at Disney World or something like that. There was a lot of concern about, you know, there's only so much real estate. So it's like, is it going to be a whole new patch of land beyond Hollywood Studios that they're going to build into, or is it going to replace something that already exists? There was a lot of concern that they were going to replace the Muppet Courtyard, which has already been shrunken dozens of times, which at one time was a major part of Hollywood Studios, was like this Muppet Courtyard, whatever it was called. Thankfully, it is not going to be replacing the Muppets. It's going to be replacing the animation building that, for better or for worse, nobody gives a shit about anymore. So, luckily, the Muppets Vision 3D is safe for now. Also, at Hollywood Studios, there's going to be a new Mandalorian and Grogu adventure for the Star Wars ride Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. That's the one where it's like a video game. You get to like drive it yourself, which makes no sense because Mandalorian has nothing to do with the Millennium Falcon. That is just cross promotion for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie that they're going to be doing. And you heard me right, theatrical movie. I'll talk about that in the next piece. We talk about the film and TV stuff. Just a couple quick hits here. Disneyland Paris, they have their second park on that property. It's currently called Walt Disney Studios Park. It's going to be renamed Disney Adventure World. It's often been derided as being very lazy, so I think they're trying to revamp it. They're going to be bringing the World of Frozen attraction from Hong Kong Disneyland. They're also going to be bringing out like a Lion King area with a Lion King attraction. It looks like from the concept art, it's going to be like a flume ride. But strangely, it's based off of the live action version of the Lion King. And I'm going to put live action in quotes, of course, because it's not that it's live action, it's just hyper-realistic computer-generated imagery, and for all intents and purposes, we're just going to call it live action remake, right? So, notably, there has not been a Lion King ride, at least in the United States. Maybe they've done something overseas. The only thing has been a Lion King. They had the show in Animal Kingdom, and they had like a little movie about the environment in Epcot and like near the Living with the Land stuff. So it's like we're finally giving you a Lion King ride, but it's going to be themed around the live action versions. So what? They're just going to be like hyper realistic lion animatronics? Like what's the value in that? Like if you want to see lions, go to Animal Kingdom. And I guess this is in Paris, but still, you get my point. Like what's the value in that? But Disney really feels like that's the direction to go, and ultimately they're the ones with the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. Just a couple quick notes here. Shanghai Disneyland is getting a Spider-Man roller coaster. Hong Kong Disneyland, across the little, I don't know what that body of water is between mainland China and Hong Kong. Anyway, Hong Kong Disneyland's also getting a Spider-Man themed ride in its Stark Expo area of Tomorrowland. And then finally, their cruise line. They're getting 4 new ships, and I think one of the new ships is going to have a Moana show, and another's going to have a Hercules show. So they're really leaning into the parks. I think there was just a report recently, like when they did their quarterly earnings, that theme park attendance has kind of lagged. They might be thinking to themselves, it's because we don't have more IP in the parks. And my answer is no. It's just that it's ridiculously expensive. My fiance Viviana and I went about a year ago, and we went for a week, and the whole trip, with food, with the travel, was like $6,000. It was insane. So that's the reason. That's the reason why attendance is so low. But I can't get mad at any of these necessarily, because more attractions is always good, again, for crowds. Because the issue isn't with Disney World being busy, it's just that there's too many people and not enough stuff to do, especially depending on the park. Like Hollywood Studios has a surprising lack of things to do. So if you have a really high attendance day, you may just have a lot of people stumbling around, waiting in lines. So any new attractions are always welcome. But if you're noticing a trend here, is that every single ride or new attraction that I mentioned is based off of an existing Disney property. And of course, this is nothing new. I don't think Disney has made an attraction that was wholly original, probably since Expedition Everest and Animal Kingdom. With the exception, there's like a, not Haunted Mansion, but like kind of a Haunted Mansion variant. And I think it's Shanghai Disneyland. That is, I think, holds the title of like the last original concept. But if you know anything about Disney history, especially like Disney theme park history, is that, you know, these rides or these parks obviously had a healthy dosing of, you know, synergy. Of course, you had the Dumbo and the teacups and stuff, right? But the big draws, like Disney wasn't interested necessarily or solely interested in just making the movies into theme park attractions. Pirates of the Caribbean was not based on anything. It's inspired by just pirate lore and iconography, but it's not being made because they're like, oh, our focus group says that people really like this property, so we should make a ride so people will come to the park and then ride the ride and then buy merch for the thing and then watch more of the thing on Disney Plus. It makes them want to come back, and that was never a concern. Haunted Mansion was just an original idea. Splash Mountain was based off of Song of the South, but very, very loosely. Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, Space Mountain, Expedition Everest, Test Track, you know, there's Ellen's Universe of Energy or whatever it was, right? These are all the Great Movie Ride, which of course was based off of a bunch of films, but it was about celebrating the medium. It's not that you can't have attractions based off of IP. It's just become very clear, and has been clear for some time now, that all they're really, really interested in, at least at the corporate level, is creating experiences based off properties people already know to get people to come. What they don't understand is that people want to go to Disney anyway. That is such a powerful brand and has spent, you know, since at least Disneyland, what was that, 70-ish years now, almost 70 years next year, of just high quality experiences. I was reading an interesting article, and I think they summed it up perfectly, where it was that older Disney attractions, they were low budget, low production value, but high creativity. And now it's almost reversed, where a lot of the rides, even the best ones, feel like assignments. They feel like corporate assignments. They feel like corporate Disney went to Imagineering and said, we want a Guardians of the Galaxy ride themed around the Tower of Terror, or we're going to reskin the Tower of Terror. Figure it out. And the Imagineers do the best they can. You know, and speaking of Guardians of the Galaxy, not Mission Breakout, but was it a Cosmic Rewind, is quite possibly one of my favorite new attractions. One of my favorite attractions at Disney World. I think it's an incredible attraction. It's the teacups meets Rock and Roller Coaster meets Space Mountain all rolled up into one. But at the end of the day, it was an assignment that no one walked into work going, I think we should do this. It was more, we want a Guardians of the Galaxy ride. Figure it out. And it's a shame that the corporate Disney doesn't understand that they have the cultural cachet and trust to do things that aren't based on intellectual property. Again, not saying that you can't have that stuff. And again, some of the most beloved rides are based off of these properties. But I feel like there needs to be a healthy balance. And right now, it's like all all calories, no protein, no nutrition. It's just all calories. And I think it's going to hurt Disney in the long run. But people have been saying, I'm sure I could find an article from 20 years ago complaining about the new attractions from 20 years ago, saying the same exact thing, right? So I'm gonna, I'm humble enough to understand that it's not like everything was perfectly great until I became critically conscious as a media consumer. I'm not saying that, but this particular moment feels particularly cynical in its panderiness. Even if these individual rides, like this Monsters Inc. ride, like this Encanto ride, even if they're phenomenal in a vacuum, but the theme parks should be more than the sum of their parts. Okay, let me grab a quick drink. That took way longer than I thought it was going to take. Okay, let's talk about story number 2. So, in terms of announcements at D23 for film and TV stuff, very similar to the parks in that it's a lot of just banking on recognizable IP, with a few exceptions. At least with the park, as opposed to the parks, there was, I don't think, anything original. At least with this, there's a couple original things here, but nothing to get excited about. But again, that's the point: is that they benefit from, building their whole business around recognizable IP, so you can have conventions like this. You can have D23. You can't have D23 for a movie that an original movie that no one knows about, no one cares about yet. So it's hard to get excited. But ultimately, that's not what films aren't sporting events. Films should not be just about getting people excited. They should get me excited when I'm watching them, and I'm excited about the medium of cinema. Let's take a look at the announcements here. So, got a bunch of trailers for stuff. I'll just kind of go through these, bing, bang, bong. I feel like Trump when he's like, bing, bong, bing, bong. So we got trailers for Mufasa, the Lion King, Mufasa origin story, which again feels like a corporate assignment. The first Lion King live-action experiment, if you will, despite getting poor reception, or just middling reception, got made over $1 billion. So it was inevitable that they were going to try to do something with this. It just feels completely soulless. And just watching the trailer, it feels like the CGI has gotten worse. Again, because it's just like they're expecting more output with less people and less time. The only thing that gives me pause, no pun intended, pause, is Barry Jenkins' involvement. I believe he's writing. I know he's definitely directing. It'd be weird if he wasn't also writing it. No, he's not writing it. He's not writing it. It's being written by Jeff Nathanson, what else did he do? He did the story for Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of Crystal Skull, and he also wrote Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, the worst Pirates of the Caribbean movie. Oh, and he also wrote the Lion King script, which was mostly just a, beat for beat copy of the animated movie. But that aside, I like Barry Jenkins. You know what I mean? I think he's a phenomenal director. Moonlight is one of my favorite movies ever. And I don't fault the guy for selling out, because I'm sure he got a very pretty penny for this. So you gotta get the bag when you can. So I'm not really gonna get mad at him one way or the other. But it just speaks to Hollywood's unceasing ability to take incredible talent and just completely ruin it, but just throwing it down the drain into this corporate assembly line way of making movies. Notably, I am not very excited for this. Something I'm a little bit more excited for is this Rachel Zegler Snow White remake. So this is really the first time they've really touched Snow White at all since that original 1937 film. Notably in the deluge of direct-to-video sequels and spin-offs and prequels of like the 90s and 2000s. Notably, Snow White never got one of those. Snow White, I think, was seen as so iconic and also just so important to the Disney brand that they didn't touch it. So we're finally getting a reinterpretation of it almost a century later. The CGI looks awful. I watched the trailer again. It's just like the movie. It looks what's the word? It looks all mushy and desaturated in all the wrong ways and too colorful in all the wrong ways. And it's a shame because it's kind of like the Little Mermaid movie, where it's like, I love Rachel Zegler, right? I loved her in West Side Story. I also just like her in general. Like, I follow her on Twitter, right? I think she's just like a cool cat. So I don't think this is going to be on her. And she's received a lot of backlash by nature of just being a woman of color playing an iconically white role. So if you came to this video to find some compatriot in your racist, sexist bashing of Rachel Zegler, go somewhere else, right? You're not going to find that here. But what I will say is that, again, let her get the bag. I'm sure she's making a pretty penny from this. But it just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence, right? And furthermore, it defeats the purpose of the original Snow White, which was Walt Disney's attempt to prove that animation can exist in a feature-length form that is just as emotionally affecting as a live-action, a quote-unquote regular movie. And so this movie being made feels like I don't know what you would call it, the natural conclusion to this trend of these Disney remakes, which, while never explicitly said, the implication has always been, it deserves the live action treatment because live action is better and live action is more important. So we're going to remake it. So now it's like, it can be taken seriously now. And that goes against the complete purpose of that original Snow White movie. So to now have this movie being made, it just brings the whole thing full circle in a really twisted and kind of pathetic way, frankly. Also got trailers for Agatha All Along, the MCU Disney Plus series, focusing on the villain, Agatha from the WandaVision series. Again, totally missed the moment to make this. I think this would have been really great, or rather, people would have been more interested in it 2-3 years ago. I don't think anyone cares anymore. I think it's not even that it's been that long. It's only been a couple of years, but so much has happened in the 3 years since WandaVision in terms of our just like kind of malaise and kind of, we've just been kind of fed up with Marvel's output. The only thing that's exciting about this is Patti LuPone is in it, which I was not expecting when I watched this trailer. And continuing on with underwhelming trailers, we have the trailer for the Disney Plus show Star Wars Skeleton Crew, which basically the idea is like E.T. but in the Star Wars universe. So it's going to be focusing on a group of kids. So it's almost like Goonies or E.T., like I said. And it features like space suburbs. By space, obviously it's not in space, it's on a planet, but the idea is like it's like Star Wars' version of suburbs. And again, like all of this, it just looks desaturated and mushy and just not visually appealing at all. But I saw a tweet that was really, the point was really well taken, that, when Steven Spielberg, was making E.T., he set the film in suburbia because of the mundanity, how mundane it is, as a interesting contrast to the fantastical story taking place. But people who have grown up with things like E.T. and the Goonies have like fetishized the idea of the 80s kid riding his bike through the suburbs as if that is as if that's the fantastical part, as if that's the thing people really, really like. So you kind of see it with Stranger Things, and now you're seeing it with this, where it's like it was always meant to be mundane, and we already got Star Wars' version of mundane. It was called Luke living on Tatooine in the original trilogy, right? So it's just, again, I mean, Jude Law is going to be in it, so I guess that's kind of cool, but it just seems kind of like I really don't care anymore. At this point, I'm just not going to be excited about stuff until I hear it's good. I just can't do it. I just can't get invested in stuff if it's going to keep turning out mediocre. Also got trailers from Moana 2. My opinions on Moana, I liked the original in concept, but the execution of the first film was very messy. It kind of felt like a first draft, or just, it was a draft that just needed another rewrite. And notably, this film was originally going to be a streaming show, but it's graduating to be a theatrical film. And notably, Toy Story 2 was going to be a direct-to-video movie, but it was just so good that they decided to make it for theaters and make it longer, put more money into it. But from my understanding, this is not why this is happening. I had reported on this story a couple months back. This is probably more it's probably not due to the quality of this show and more so out of a financial necessity. I think Disney and all these other companies are realizing that it's just really, the business model of streaming is not what they thought it was, which they never should have thought it was that in the first place. So they're like, shit, we put a lot of money into this. Let's release this in theaters. Let's cut it down. So that we can make some actual dollars back and not just like, oh, we got some new subscribers and we got some ad revenue and all this stuff. I am excited for more Coconut People. They did show at the end of the trailer they're going to be back. I thought they may just be a one-off. They were my favorite part of the first one, so I am excited to see that. Speaking of Disney Plus shows, we got a trailer here or a teaser, if you will, for the Pixar Disney Plus series Win or Lose. So this is notably Pixar's first original long-form series. I think they were, I don't know if they still are, but they did like a Monsters Inc. spinoff called Monsters at Work. But this is going to be like their first original kind of premise. And I'm actually really excited for this because this is exactly what I want from them. Because it has a great art style and it focuses on real-world characters with real-world problems with an animated flair. And, that was my big complaint with a lot of Pixar's films is it's like, like, why can't you just explore, like I said, real characters and not like a giraffe learning to find his place in the animal kingdom? Like, why is it always that? Because when early Pixar would do stuff like that, it was always a cipher and always a very complex exploration of the real thematic ambitions. And to a point it still is, but it's very superficial. One of my favorite Pixar movies of the last 5 or 10 years is Turning Red. I almost wish she didn't turn into a red panda. Like, I almost prefer just the parts where it's just her being a preteen girl getting into trouble with her friends and going through preteen girl stuff, right? And oftentimes people say with animation, if something's animated, it should have to be animated. That you shouldn't just make something just to make it animated. And number one, I disagree with that because that implies that animation is only something, it's like a tool in your toolkit that you only bust out when you need it, as opposed to its own unique creative expression. But even if that were true, I feel like people interpret that to mean do something, you should make your thing animated if you wouldn't be able to effectively pull it off in live action. And I think that's misguided. I think rather you should be animation. Obviously, you can have all of these kinds of stories, but I think with modern animation, particularly from Disney and Pixar, is an over-reliance on wacky, fantastical premises, where really, you should sprinkle in more just on paper. It's just like, it could be just like a live action, regular people, quote unquote, movie. But it's the execution that makes it worthy of the animation medium. You know what I mean? If you go watch this trailer for the show Win or Lose, it has an animated, it has a flair to it, a stylistic flair. So it's just disappointing to see that most of, Disney and Pixar's output is like this, but hopefully Win or Lose kind of meets those expectations I have. A couple other trailers shown. They showed clips for the new Pixar film Elio, which again, kind of similar situation. It's a guy and he gets abducted by an alien or something. I'm not really super well versed on it. They showed a clip for the second season of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and they also did a little teaser for the live action Lilo and Stitch, which you can see pictured here. The uncanny valley is just odd. Something about it looks weird that he just has completely black, soulless eyes. And then I looked at the cartoon version. He also has completely black eyes. But just seeing it in 3 dimensions just looks weird. And it's like a weird uncanny valley thing. But it's being directed by the guy who did Marcel the Shell, which is one of my favorite movies. So, I have to maybe hold my breath and see if I like it. But, again, Disney just... It's like a meat grinder. They just put in all these talented filmmakers and just grind them out. Some footage was shown that we don't have, though I'm sure it's been leaked, people filming on their phones, but we don't have official footage for this. But footage was also shown for Tron Ares, so that's going to be like the third Tron film people are really excited for. And notably, Nine Inch Nails is going to be composing the score, which actually sounds sick. And it's cool and all, but like, do people really care enough? Like, the people who really like Tron are excited, but I don't know if Tron is really getting people all worked up. It needs to have a really awesome trailer the way Tron Legacy did. Made people like all of a sudden huge Tron fans, 15 years ago. Also got footage for the MCU Disney Plus show Ironheart, which is going to be following, I forget her name, and I think this just speaks to the movie's quality, but the girl from Black Panther Wakanda Forever, the girl that they bring on, she's in college, and she's kind of almost like a new Tony Stark, and she develops her own kind of Iron Man-ish suit. She's Ironheart. She's getting her own show. I'm kind of excited for that since she was one of my favorite parts of that movie. We also got footage for Captain America Brave New World, Fantastic Four, stuff that was shown at Comic-Con a couple weeks ago. Also got footage for The Mandalorian and Grogu, a Star Wars film following the adventures of Mandalorian and Grogu, which I have not watched Mandalorian since Season 2, but from my understanding, they've reunited, even though the whole point of the end of Season 2 is about them going their separate ways. I don't even know what to say anymore. Also got footage for Andor Season 2. We got some announcements for Zootopia 2. It's going to introduce Kei-Wei Kwan, of course, from Everything Ever All at Once. He's going to be playing a character now in the series. And we also got footage for Daredevil Born Again, the reboot of the Netflix Daredevil show, now on Disney+. And then finally, in terms of some announcements here, the Freaky Friday sequel with Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan got an official title, Freakier Friday, with a little promotional photo of modern Lindsay Lohan and Jamie Lee Curtis doing like the, I'm in my mom's body. What was that line from the movie? I look like the Crypt Keeper. That movie's kind of funny. We also got announcements for a new National Geographic show called Do Not Attempt, and it's like a David Blaine magic show, I guess. We also got announcements for, some of these annoyed the shit out of me, Frozen 3, The Incredibles 3, Toy Story 5, which it's going to reunite Woody and all of them, and they're going to be, so supposedly it's going to be them fighting against tech, like iPads and stuff. I feel like them doing this undermines the ending of Toy Story 4, which itself was already undermining the ending of Toy Story 3, which controversially, in my opinion, undermined Toy Story 2 a little bit. So I just reject this whole thing. But notably, it is going to be written and directed by Andrew Stanton. So Andrew Stanton was like one of like the Pixar, founding fathers in a sense. He wrote, or at least was a co-writer on a bunch of films that, including Toy Story 2, Monsters, Inc. He also did some work on Toy Story 4 and also wrote the story, has a story credit for Toy Story 3. And of course, he wrote and directed Finding Nemo, WALL-E, and Finding Dory. So he has that track record. But now he's going to be writing and directing this film, which is interesting. We also got an announcement for a Pixar film called Hoppers, which, again, I'm happy to see an original idea, but like what I was saying before, it's original, but of course it has to be wacky, because the only way you can get people in is if they recognize the property or it's wacky. So Hoppers is going to be following a girl who, quote, and I shit you not, this is the exact quote from the press release or whatever, follows a girl who, quote, switches brains with beavers to learn about the secrets of beavers, end quote. What secrets do beavers have? I don't know. We're also getting a Disney Plus show. We already knew about this, but we just got more info. An Inside Out spin-off series called Dream Productions. It's going to be about the Dream, exactly what's that, the Dream Productions that they have in that universe, where it's like the dreams are like shows that they put on for Riley while she sleeps. Who asked for this? Avatar 3 also got an official subtitle, so it's going to be Avatar Fire and Ash. They're really doing all the elements here, The first one was kind of earthy, and then the last one was water, and now they're doing fire. So, notably, the reason why the animated series Avatar The Last Airbender had to have the subtitle The Last Airbender is because James Cameron trademarked the name Avatar back in, like, the late 90s when he first started developing Avatar. So it's funny now that not only do they have that relationship, in a sense, but now they're doing all these elements kind of like The Last Airbender. And then a random announcement, a Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson movie about monster trucks called Monster Jam. I don't even know what to say about a lot of this. Again, it's kind of like what I was saying with the theme parks, is that if you notice here, it's just a lot of stuff related to things we already know and love, or potentially love. And I just feel like Disney, they are I think corporate America in general, this isn't a Disney unique issue, but corporate America, especially in the entertainment industry, is just so short-sighted. Because these guys and gals, these top positions are very short-term motivated, because that's how their bonuses are calculated. They're not going to be, a lot of these people aren't going to be in these top executive positions for decades. They're going to maybe do it for 4 years, then jump to a new company, do that for 5 years, then over here for 3, and then here for 7. And, so there's really not a lot of incentive to build something. So none of this is surprising. That's the thing, is that I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed. I think it's just that, all of these things that they're remaking or making sequels to or making reboots of or whatever you want to, or spin-offs, were once original ideas. That you can do as many of these franchise pillagings as you want, but you need enough original content to replenish the well. And it really should be like 75% original, 25% follow-up of some kind or continuation of a franchise, but they basically have flipped it. And not only have they flipped it, it's really like 95 or 90% franchise IP based, and then like 10% original. And then they really don't put a lot of weight behind the original stuff. It fails, and they go, see, this is why we shouldn't do original stuff. And it's like, well, you didn't really try. So it is just disappointing to see, Disney they just don't understand. Like, they're screwing themselves over. I'll get over it. There's plenty of other amazing films to watch, including their own movies from years or decades ago. So really, the only person that they're screwing over is themselves. And they're gonna they've made their bed, and they're gonna have to sleep in it eventually. It's just a matter. And I think they've started to sleep in it, and they're trying to remake the bed. But I'm not sure if that's gonna work for them. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. These next couple of stories should be shorter, because there weren't as many announcements. So, looking at theatrical announcements from D23, we did get some announcements relating to the theater. What happened to the theater? We got an announcement that a Frozen Pro Shot is heading to Disney Plus. If you don't know what a Pro Shot is exactly what it sounds like, a professionally shot version of a stage play or musical, for the express purpose of watching, not as if you're not really, if you're not there. And Broadway doesn't always do these, and it's a real shame just for the preservation of the content. Because, of course, the best way to experience that content is the way it was intended to be seen. But eventually, people die, or they leave the cast, or the show shuts down. So we should at least have a record of these shows. Because, of course, there's bootlegs, and there are some archival recordings of things, but not a lot that's commercially and publicly available. So even though I'm not a huge fan of Frozen, the movie, or the musical, I'm excited to that this exists. I wish it existed when I have a sister channel called Peter Squared, where I do video essays, and the one video essay I have up is all about Frozen, and I talked about the musical, but I had to watch a bootleg. So it would have been much more helpful to have this pro shot. But that's going to be heading to Disney Plus at some point, maybe at the end of the year. I don't remember. But in other musical news, there is a Hercules musical, which is exciting, because for that movie's flaws, one of the best things about it is the music. That has been kind of playing kind of like third level theatrical cities. It's going to be heading to London's West End in 2025. That's usually a stop that it would make, and then it would eventually come to the United States on Broadway, right? So that's exciting. It's one step closer to that Broadway treatment. And they're also, in the surprise announcement, Disney's going to be developing a stage version of The Greatest Showman. Now, if you're too young to remember The Greatest Showman, it was a cultural phenomenon. It opened like the very end of 2017, like December. And it was one of those movies that didn't open very big and just kept going and going and going and holding. And sometimes not only did it have really small drops week to week, but sometimes it actually went up the next week. Even though it's a pretty mediocre movie and musical. It was originally distributed by 20th Century Fox, so now it's part of the Disney machine. So they are going to be developing a stage musical for it, which everyone said when this movie came out originally that would be a no-brainer. The question is Disney going to try to make a bigger move in the theatrical space, right? Because their success has ranged from wildly successful to pretty successful to fine to not so great. So, you still have things like Lion King that have been running for, as long as I've been alive, basically. But then you have things like the Frozen musical that I think debuted in 2018 and then closed during COVID, like everything, and just never reopened. It was officially canceled, right? Aladdin has been fairly successful. Little Mermaid was on Broadway for some time, but obviously eventually closed. There was a Tarzan musical that was decent, but closed. And, Beauty and the Beast was very successful. I'm not sure when that closed, though. But in any case, it'll be interesting to see, are they going to keep trying to develop musicals or stage musical versions of their films? And what's going to be interesting is, will they maybe not be lazy fucks for like 5 seconds, and could they perhaps develop musical versions of their non-musical films, or even more daring, develop new and original musicals that aren't based off of any existing IP, which tonight for this broadcast is a recurring theme. Notably, they did produce the Elton John, Tim Rice musical Aida. I think it was like the late 90s, early 2000s. Of course, that's the music writing duo for the original Lion King. But that wasn't based off of anything. And they did technically produce that. I'm not sure of how many other examples of musicals or plays that Disney has produced that weren't based off of one of their own properties. But again, it's like they should get into that market. Like, why aren't they, it's like, it's not an issue if you're this corporate octopus and you have all your tentacles in all of these different arenas, but it's like you should be contributing to those mediums, right? These arenas shouldn't just be places to dump auxiliary media to your primary IP, right? So in the parks, why not create a ride that is just for its own sake? That could become its own franchise. Or write a book that is not based off of anything. It's just a book. Or a musical that's just a musical. I don't know. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Let's talk about the fourth con topic. Disney also made some announcements about their gaming pursuits, but not many announcements, which was a little disappointing. Notably, no Kingdom Hearts news. We got that amazing, and by amazing I just mean very surprising, Kingdom Hearts 4 trailer more than 2 years ago, and we really have heard since then. I know some people, Kingdom Hearts fans, are always hoping that every single possible event that Kingdom Hearts could showcase footage for, they will get all worked up. I see it on Twitter, and they're like, this is going to happen. They're going to show some stuff. And it rarely, if ever, happens. So I don't know why they do this themselves, these Kingdom Hearts fans. The big announcement here was kind of a little more insight into Disney's partnership with Epic Games. And, of course, they're the makers of Fortnite. But the announcement was kind of a disappointment, right? Because I had reported on this channel. You can go back and watch the video. That Disney is investing all this money into Epic Games. And we were like, what is that going to end up meaning? We still really don't know. They alluded to that more announcements will be coming soon in like the next couple months. But we didn't really get any new exciting announcements. All we got here was that Disney characters are coming to Fortnite, right? I think it's going to start with some Marvel characters like you see here, like X-Men. And then eventually, I think in the fall, it's going to extend to like more iconic Disney characters. And this is a shame because it's like, if you're not ready to make these announcements, okay, that's fine. But it's like you are giving me a little. It's like I'd rather you just not give me anything than give me a little tiny bit. And there's really not much to say. There's not all too much to say about this, but what I wanted to talk about this for is that it's a shame because Disney's gaming division has languished. And by language, I mean, essentially it's dead. There was Disney Interactive for decades, and then they shut it down. And, I think it's a shame. So take Lucasfilm, for example. Lucasfilm, of course, George Lucas's production company, eventually formed its own video game division that, of course, developed or at least just published Star Wars games. If they didn't make them themselves, they would work with another studio to make them. But they also made a wide library of original non-IP specific games, like Secret of Monkey Island, like Grim Fandango, all these like point-and-click games. And then when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they shut down LucasArts. And it was such a shame because this was like a thriving, very well-regarded gaming little corner of the gaming industry. And I talked about Kingdom Hearts before, but Disney could do really well in the gaming sphere, or maybe they couldn't, and maybe that's why they haven't really done it, because they had been doing stuff. Notably, before they shut down everything, they had their own little kind of crossover game, but it wasn't really story-driven. It wasn't like Kingdom Hearts. It was called Disney Infinity. It was like one of those like figurine games where it's like you have to buy the physical figurines and then like connect them like using like sensors to like a special reader, and then you can play as those characters. So the idea was a big marketing scheme where it's like instead of just buying one game, you're going to have to buy all these figurines, and whoever makes this game is going to make a bunch of money. So I think it was Spyro did a version of this. I think, was it Lego did a version of this, or Warner Brothers or something. I think, yeah, Lego. It was like Lego Dimensions. And it was pulling from all these different Warner Brothers properties and Lego stuff. And Disney had its own version. But I never played it, but I always liked the art style. And I think there's something to the idea of like, even if you didn't have the physical figurine element to the gameplay, it would be like, you have all these Disney characters and you could just play around with all of them like it's like a big toy box, right? And you're just playing with your toys in a big sandbox. And it's just a shame that Disney really only, they made all these big announcements. And again, maybe I'm going to be proven wrong when they make further announcements about this, but because they made a whole, Bob Iger made a whole to-do about gaming is the future. But it seems like they just kind of want to make as much money from gaming with the least amount of work as possible. And again, it's like, you can make really great licensed games or games, and you're not even licensing them. Like you can make really great games based off of your own intellectual property. And furthermore, if you just get a developer or create a developer in-house, you can just make really good games and then just be a major player in the game space. But it's clear Disney is not interested in that. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, so what I wanted to sum everything up that we've been talking about with all these D23 announcements. I wanted to come back to this picture here. So this is concept art for the very first thing I talked about in this broadcast tonight about this animatronic Walt Disney. And I had said then, and I want to bring it up again, that in a vacuum, this is kind of cool, right? If you like film history, if you like Disney history, it's kind of cool. But the fact that they are literally resurrecting their founder and having him alongside Abraham Lincoln speaks to, I think, Disney's allegiance. Adoration is the wrong word. I'm as you can see, I'm struggling to find the words here. Commitment, obsession, whatever you want to call it, with its own. They're becoming far too self-referential. That in order to self-reference, there has to be something to reference. At the heart of every franchise was the initial original idea. And Disney seems very uninterested in crafting those kinds of things anymore. Again, it's like with the parks, whether it be the parks or the films or what have you, even if they turn out really great in a vacuum, oftentimes they are corporate assignments. Whether it's the Guardians of the Galaxy ride or a Incredibles 3, no matter how good they turn out, they originate not with someone going, I have this idea I want to explore. It originates from, we want something related to this pre-existing thing, make it. Do something with this. And it just feels like corporate necromancy, this idea of just trying to dig up whatever they can find. Any and every drop of nostalgia, brand loyalty, brand recognition, brand adoration. It just feels like Disney is becoming creatively bankrupt. If not in execution, then in conception. That their initial ideas for things are very it's like someone a bunch of people in a boardroom went, the line will go up on the stock market if we do this. When it comes to the parks especially, it just feels like Disney's been playing defense, right? It just feels like they've been trying to play catch up with Universal, right? And the thing with Universal, and it's not just with this current management at Disney, because Hollywood Studios, formerly MGM Studios, was originally conceived by Michael Eisner as a response to Universal opening up its own theme park, the initial Universal Studios. So the thing about Universal is that it has always been based in IP. I've never been Universal, but I don't think there's any attraction that is not based on something. But it's okay for Universal. And the reason why is that for better or for worse, that's their intention. That's their brand. They've never been anything else. Disney has always been about quality in the experience. The forest for the trees. The park should be more than the sum of its parts. But when Universal debuted the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Disney laid an egg. They shit a brick. They freaked out. And, before that, you're getting attractions, of course, based off of films and IP. It's after Wizarding World of Harry Potter that you get Toy Story Land, that you get Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, that you get Pandora and Animal Kingdom. These immersive, big quotes, immersive. That it's not just immersive in that you are immersed in the world of the theme park. What they're trying to do is immerse you in the world of the film. And I think that is that's the tension. It's trying to balance these two competing ambitions. Universal can do that because it has no further ambitions. Universal, and again, I've not been to a single Universal park. Maybe Universal fans can correct me or maybe more politely inform me or educate me. I don't think Universal is really trying to be more than the sum of its parts. I think it's just trying to have really great parts. But Disney has always tried to be more than the sum of its parts, and that's why you have this weird tension, and that's why it's been a mixed success, right? So you have, Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, which is like one of the best rides that Disney Imagineering has ever created, one of the best attractions they've ever created, but Galaxy's Edge is kind of a dud, right? It's how you can have Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind be one of my favorite Disney attractions of all time. And yet, it feels so incongruous with at least the original intention and ambitions of Epcot. Again, same thing on the film and TV side. It feels like they're creatively bankrupt. They've struggled lately, but finally been faced with their failures, their creative failures. But I think they're not... excuse me. I don't think they're aware of why these failures happen. I think they think these failures happen, but for different reasons. Right, that like they look at the Marvels, right, is an example of a film that did not do well critically or commercially. the reason for that, I didn't see the movie, but the reason, from my understanding, is just people were tired of the MCU, and this movie wasn't particularly very good. But Disney went, oh no, we veered too much off of the core. We gotta make it even more like what people remember. And it's like, no. You created this problem of oversaturation. The idea that the solution is not to double down on the familiar. The solution is to make new and good. See, that's the thing Hollywood always forgets. You need both. It has to be original and good. It can be good but not original, or original but not good. You really need both for it to stand the test of time. And again, like I've been saying a million times, do they not realize that all of these franchises that they are using as the fodder for new films, new shows, new theme park attractions, new games, new books, new theatrical experiences, do they not realize these were once original ideas? Eventually the well is going to dry up. Eventually they're going to get in such a feedback loop that I don't think people are going to want to go see The Incredibles 6, frankly. I think the bottom will bottom out, as they say. Like I said, they've been trying to correct the course, but I think their idea of correcting the course is just to go back to what worked before, and I don't think that's going to work. Even if it pays off for them in the short term, I don't think that's going to... Whoever is running this company a decade from now is going to have a lot of things that they have to... Like, they're not even going to be able to really start from square one. They're going to have to spend most of their time just fixing the problems that their predecessors laid out for them. Okay, so we're almost done. Tonight was supposed to be a shorter night. I don't know how this ended up being one of my longest broadcasts. The only upcoming major release we have is the new Aliens film, Alien Romulus. It's projected. I'm projecting it's going to make about 43 to 52 million for the weekend, which is pretty decent. Again, it kind of has its own little niche, like this kind of horror action movie. The only thing that it can maybe be competing with would be Twisters and Deadpool. But I think those three films are so different from one another that I think this has a good shot of doing pretty well. I really like Alien and Aliens. I've not seen any of like these new rebooted movies, so that's why I need to spend my time this next week and a half or so watching those. But it'll be interesting to see if this one plays well at the box office and also gets some decent reviews. We should probably know by tomorrow. Okay, I want to give a few quick plugs. I had said it before, but this is my only YouTube channel. I have a sister channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more written out video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take Frozen, take a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these cartoon versions of the old and young version of myself. It really would be a huge help if you go check out that video, like the video, comment if you feel so inclined, and subscribe. You can find the link in the description below. Also, I give a plug to a podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right now we're doing the Star Wars franchise, which is exciting. We just did our episode last Friday on The Empire Strikes Back. This upcoming week is gonna be The Return of the Jedi. So definitely go check that out. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts. You can also listen on YouTube if that's your preferred way to listen to podcasts. You can also just find us in the link in the description below. And then finally, I want to give another plug to Cinnamon Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I cover... I publish more formal written reviews for new movies coming out. I have my review up for Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm sorry, I work full time, so it maybe takes me a little bit longer than I'd like to get these reviews out. But then they're up there for in perpetuity. So you can go back to the archive. I've reviewed in one way or another over 100 movies on the newsletter. So go check that out. You can find the link in the description down below. You can also just go to your browser and type in cinnamonqso.substack.com. That's it for this week. Thank you all so much for joining. I'm very sick. I feel way worse than I did when I started this, but I got everything off my chest that I needed to get off my chest, except all the hair. So I'm going to maybe go shave off that hair. Until next time, I'll see you next week. Peace out.